great piece called "I Was a Circus Performer." And unlike people in radio, who really mean that, and they were kicked out and had to get into radio, I think he just did this as a little sideline.
Bill had good background before getting Ringling Brothers because he covered the Blagojevich trial. So if any, circus atmosphere.
Oh, yeah, he's used to that. Bill, good morning.
Hey, morning, Riley and Scott. Thanks for having me on.
Glad to have you on with us. What a great piece this is, and boy, I hate it when I learn something and I'm not expecting to. But I learned a whole bunch of things about what goes on behind the scenes in a circus. What got you interested in this?
Well, what got us interested in it was a November settlement in which the animal rights group ASPCA agreed to pay Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, almost $10 million, which is about 10% of their annual budget, in order to settle a lawsuit that Ringling Brothers had filed against them alleging litigation abuse. So that's what got us interested in it. And to be honest, I was actually hoping to be more of a circus performer. This was supposed to be a fun piece in which I washed elephants and shoveled elephant poop, and I ended up mistakenly learning stuff and shifting the tone of the piece to one about education of their animal treatment. It was they were so protective of these guys, they wouldn't let me near them, aside from an opportunity I had to feed them. So it was I too accidentally learned something throughout the course of the piece. So it was a little disappointing.
I love your line where you said, "I thought I was meeting some cigar-chopping sadist that would live up to the sucker-born every-minute mantra attributed to P.T. Barnum. Instead, I found a bunch of animal-loving NYU grads whose sentimental regard for nature makes me cringe."
Well, yeah, my editor actually toned that down because I am, in fact, an animal hater, and the Ringling people were not impressed when I told them this. I felt so much more concern for the Shaolin monks who were having, objects broken over the back of their necks than I was for the elephants. I honestly couldn't have given a lick if they beat these things into submission, and instead there are a bunch of hippies taking care of the elephants. It was really disappointing.
The article, "I Was a Circus Performer," is at the Washington Free Beacon site, not to be confused with the Free Bacon site.
Oh, yeah, which we have that bookmarked, for sure.
We already did that promotional giveaway. Everyone came out a winner.
It's also linked up on our Twitter feed, too, the "I Was a Circus Performer" article. But in going behind the scenes here, Bill, there's a whole lot that goes into, and you specifically focused on the elephants, one of the biggest attractions for the circus. And there's something in here about every time an elephant is born, it's a guaranteed sunk cost of at least $1 million for Ringling Brothers, right? Because of the ongoing care that they give the animals even after their performing days are done.
Well, that was actually one of the more surprising things I learned is that only a third of Ringling elephants are actually capable of performing. The rest of them are just a sinkhole, a money pit for these guys, because they still provide the people the elephants who never perform with the same amount of care that they provide their divas, as they call them. So it was very surprising to hear that, not only are these guys, bringing these elephants around the country and making them perform, they're also taking care of their babies back home. They're taking care of the adult males who are basically useless on the road after the age of between the ages of 4 and death. So these guys spend a ton of money taking care of elephants that don't do a lick for them. So Ringling has actually been a pioneer in terms of medical treatment of elephants and in terms of artificial insemination and birthing techniques for elephants. So much so that that elephant managers, zookeepers, and people from native countries that have elephants in the wild, they go to Ringling. They fly to Ringling and they ask Ringling, "Hey, how do you take care of your elephants?" So these cultures that have been taking care of elephants for centuries, millennia, these guys are asking Ringling how they should better care for their elephants. So it was pretty neat to see what a player Ringling had become. In basically 140 years of touring with elephants, they're now the leaders in caring for elephants in the wild.
And, Bill, so much so that they have a 200-acre compound called the Center for Elephant Conservation. What happens there?
Well, I mean, even elephants retire to Florida. It's pretty ridiculous.
It's the law.
And they eat earlier, too, 4 p.m.
Exactly. So they keep about 28 elephants there, 28 to 30 elephants there at a given time. And basically all day long, the female elephants play with their young, the baby elephants, play around on balls, and the adult males threaten your lives and masturbate. That's pretty much all that goes on there. And the ringling personnel just hang out and watch the beauty unfold.
That's a wonderful description of what they were doing and what the others were viewing. You point out in your piece as well, because the Ringling Brothers has been on the receiving end of some outrageous claims by, well, you don't call them that necessarily, but boy, there's some weasels that are involved here.
Well, yes, the settlement that Ringling just reached was stemmed from a countersuit, which is a very hard legal tactic to perform. Pretty much, lawyers are a protected class in the United States, in that in 90% of cases, even when a case is dismissed, you're not allowed to allege that the opposing lawyers acted in bad faith. The judge found in Ringling's case that these animal rights groups brought such a frivolous suit, and they paid off to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars to a disgruntled Ringling employee to sue Ringling. The judge said that this suit cleared that bar and allowed Ringling to countersue these guys. And the fact that we spoke to several legal experts, and they said that $10 million is not chump change. This isn't, a throwaway sum of money that you put down to make a case disappear. This is a serious amount of money. So it does raise questions about what the ASPCA is hiding here.
Bill McMorris with us from the Washington Free Beacon. His feature, I Was a Circus Performer, is on the site and also on our Twitter feed about going behind the scenes with the Ringling Brothers. Bill, the one of the accusations, and many, is kind of set around the pointed fiberglass sticks, the training devices that are carried around by those who take care of the animals. You got up close and personal both with the actual device and saw how it was used both in front of and behind the scenes. What happened there?
Well, basically, it's this 2-foot stick, and the animal rights groups call it by the ominous name. It's a perfect villain name of the bull hook. Ringling calls it a guide, which is a very PC thing befitting an NYU graduate. I decided to just call it what it was, and it's a child's fire poker. It's lightweight. It's not sharp like these guys, like the animal rights groups have said. And it was actually pretty funny. There's been these edited videos that have come out from PETA and all sorts of other groups that show these elephants getting hit on the head really hard. You can hear the thwacks by Ringling trainers. And you sit there, you have a visceral reaction to this, because it looks like these guys are just poor victims of bullying. Well, I reached out to a physicist I know, and he ran some calculations for me. While I was at the Ringling camp, one of the elephants actually tried to charge me, and it ended up headbutting one of the steel bars that was holding him in. He was a very angry elephant because he didn't have anyone to mate with, I guess.
Well, we all get that way.
Yeah. So anyway, I had the physicist go out and compare the force that elephant underwent when he headbutted that cage to one of these child fire pokers that was being swung by Albert Pujols. And he found out that if Albert Pujols reared up and took a home run swing to the elephant's head, it would hit the elephant with 3 times less force than the simple headbutt that the elephant did. So these elephants are capable of hurting themselves far more than humans are capable of hurting them. So even though there's this sentimental regard that, you don't hit an elephant in the head, the elephant can barely feel that. You have to swing in order to get their attention. If you go up and you pet an elephant on the side, he's not going to notice that. You need to actually, these guys have inch-thick skin. You have to use some force to get their attention. So if these animal rights groups are saying, hey, you shouldn't touch them, you shouldn't get them going, Ringling raises a good case when it says, you know what, we really don't feel like having elephants stampeding into crowds. We have to get their attention, and this is the best way to do it. It's been used for centuries. This hands across America type attitude for elephants is pretty silly.
Bill McMorris, Washington Free Beacon. You point out in here there's a great exchange that you have with a first grade teacher that kind of typifies how these movements get going.
Oh, absolutely. But I actually spoke to many teachers. So I went to a child's performance. All the kids are just ecstatic to be there. And I'm talking to some of these teachers, and more than a few of them, it was their first time at the circus. And it was because their parents wouldn't let them go because of animal cruelty. So I got very interested, and I spoke to this one teacher who was basically saying, oh, they verbally abuse these elephants in order to get them, in line and to make them perform all sorts of tricks. So I was listening to her, and within a couple minutes of observing her with her students, she was ranting and raving and, telling all of them, get in line, hold hands. And it reminded me exactly of the elephants holding one another's tail as they march in. So it was the perfect way to cap off this entire story.
I love your line. If I was going to listen to ignorance, I decided I would get it from the kids.
Oh, you're making me blush.
That's an awesome. There's a bunch of funny lines. You are very funny, and you make great points.
If you can tell my wife, that would be great.
Sure, be happy to.
Now, Bill, in some ways, this is all somewhat common sense stuff, I would think, because at its core, the circus is a business, and it makes sense for Ringling Brothers to take the best care of the animals that they can, because a circus that leaves a trail of dead animals and dead elephants and injured spectators is not going to last very long, and Ringling Brothers has been doing it for an awfully long time.
Exactly, and that's actually something we're seeing in the wild right now, is all these animal rights groups said that they want to send these elephants back to the wild, and they want to free them. The problem is that you can't walk into the ASPCA can't walk into Sri Lanka or other third world countries and tell them, hey, here's a bunch of elephants. These countries are already overcrowded, and there's actually been a huge conflict in Sri Lanka between elephants and human beings, because humans are trying to get by, they're trying to grow some crops, they're trying to feed their families, and elephants come in, stampede through the village and eat all the crops. So these guys, these poor farmers in Sri Lanka, sit there and they say, well, what am I going to do? They've resorted to shooting elephants, to poisoning elephants. There have even been reports that they've used IEDs to kill elephants that try to destroy their crops. So I would love, I imagine, these Sri Lankan farmers, they don't want to do this to elephants. They just have to. I imagine that they would, however, really like to do it to an ASPCA worker that tried to march up to them and say, hey, here's an elephant. Yeah. Aren't you happy?
Let me tell you what you're doing wrong in your village here.
Yeah. I think that's why the rifle was invented, right?
One of the reasons. The piece is I Was a Circus Performer. Washington Free Beacon is where you can find it, and Bill McMorris is your writer. Bill, like I said, really, really funny stuff, but a really great insight into what goes on behind the scenes.
Well, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate it.
Have a terrific day. It's 9:51 at News Talk 1440.